Hey everybody, this is your captain speaking, and it's so great to be back continuing our conversation about the astrology of September and October of 2024. I hope you got a chance to see my last video on the Moon-Venus conjunction that just happened, and I hope you got out to see it. Let me know what it was like for you going out on your expedition to catch one of the most amazing, most beautiful alignments that you can see regularly. Moon-Venus conjunctions happen regularly, which is part of what's so sweet about them. You get to hang out with them often, the way you're able to hang out often with your closest friends and family, your loved ones. That's what Moon-Venus feels like. Feels like getting to hang out pretty often with someone you really like. And so I hope you got a chance to hang out with the Moon-Venus conjunction. As I'm recording this, it's actually happening. This video is not going to be going out for another day or two, and it won't be happening at that point. But yes, I'm looking forward to going out and seeing it in a couple of hours with my beloved wife. And yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. Hopefully it'll be clear. The weather has been not so great in the evenings here. So, but I believe in magic. I believe in magic when you try to get out and see an amazing alignment. I believe in magic when you try to feel into an amazing alignment. And I've got some amazing alignments to talk with you about. There's a lot happening over the next 6 weeks. And which reminds me, I've got a promotion going on over the next 6 weeks. And if you sign up in the next few days, you can get a $75 discount on my readings. All of the information is down below in the information box. And I would really love to work with you. It's a great time to get an astrology reading, I feel, because there's really good energies to work with. Complex energy, yes. There's always a mix of energies, challenging and sweet, joyful and more difficult. But yes, it's a dynamic time, I feel. And I'd love to help you maximize it. So check it out, okay? And I also just want to say, if you find this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and maybe sign up for my channel. It really helps the algorithm and spreads the word. So thank you for that. So yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on right now. And maybe it's good to just focus on the big picture to start out. You know, it's been a big year. If you follow my videos, you know that earlier in the year, the whole first half of the year, the dominant energy was the once in 13-year Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and all of its potential for creativity and breakthroughs and peak experiences and quantum leaps onto new timelines, you know, and happy twists of fate. I'm curious how many of you have had some breakthroughs in the first half of the year that have led to some higher timelines where, you know, some happy opportunities have come into your life, that kind of thing. Tell me about them down below. And so that really strong energy has now faded, but it was strong right up until, I would say, I don't know, Mars went across it. You can see here, Mars was first conjunct Uranus and then Jupiter. And this was kind of the last phase of the conjunction, I would say. Here they were already quite broad, but there was something about Mars first conjoining Uranus and then Jupiter that, yeah, definitely felt like the last wave of the energy came through. And then more recently, Mars moved off of the Jupiter conjunction. And it's like, I felt like at that point, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction really started to come to an end. And my sense is that it's such a strong energy that's inclined towards flying high and peak experiences and peak creativity, that there's a really important process after it ends that has a lot to do with grounding and getting real. Like Jupiter Uranus is a kind of wow, amazing kind of energy. And then it's like, okay, time to get grounded, time to keep it real, time to get focused, time to take that amazing creative burst and bring it into a more solid form. And so, yeah, it's not the easiest energy to kind of come down to earth. It's not the easiest energy to come down to earth after. But yes, we've had a lot of help. And one thing that happened here in the past couple months, as Mars was moving off of Jupiter, at the same time, Jupiter was squaring Saturn. So we actually had this pretty challenging alignment of Mars, Jupiter, square Saturn. On the one hand, it's a really helpful energy. It gives a lot of confidence for moving forward, and a kind of confident hiking up the mountain towards our goals energy. But at the same time, it was square to Saturn. And this is when the Jupiter square Saturn alignment came in. So we've moved from a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction into a Jupiter-Saturn square. And they're so different. Jupiter-Uranus about kind of flying high, and Jupiter-Saturn much more pragmatic. Has a lot to do with like working really hard, Saturn, to build your bigger vision into reality, and doing really kind of practical things to work towards success. Jupiter has to do with success, and Saturn has to do with hard work and discipline and structure and order. And Saturn tends to slow things down, where Jupiter-Uranus is like really fast. Jupiter-Saturn kind of slows down the expansion. And so as we came out of the spring and entered the summer, there definitely was something about kind of slowing down and getting grounded, also kind of trying to mobilize energy to build things and to, kind of work hard to expand our lives in a successful way. But with Mars on the Saturn, Mars on the Jupiter-Saturn, there was definitely a potential for a kind of frustrating energy, where there was more tension and blockages and obstacles, and definitely have felt that in these past months here in our lives, in terms of like moving into a new home and trying to get everything done that needs to happen, where sometimes there's obstacles that kind of frustrate the goals, where there can sometimes be a kind of simultaneity of Jupiter on the one hand, a lot of abundance and joy and success, while at the same time a sense of challenges and feeling burdened and feeling like things are going slower than you might like. And so, I just want to acknowledge that we've moved into some really different energy from the last year, really. The first 6 months of this year and the second 6 months of last year, dominated by the Jupiter-Uranus, and then moving right into this Jupiter-Saturn square, where, it's so paradoxical because there's such opposites. Jupiter having to do with joy and success, and Saturn sometimes having to do with sorrow and sadness and a sense of, the existential challenges of life. And so when they come together, there's often a kind of initiation into how life can paradoxically have both energies really strong, where in one area of your life, you feel a lot of joy and abundance and success. And in another area, perhaps there's a sense of loss or sadness, or frustration, and a sense of, life is filled with both joys and sorrows. There are ups, get up to the mountaintop peak, but then we also have to come down the mountain into the valleys. There's the hard work of climbing the mountain, the hard work of getting back down. And so it's like, it doesn't have to be like where they are different areas of your life. It could be the same thing that has a lot of joy, where maybe you've been really successful or fortunate in some area, but then there's the challenges that go with that success, where, maybe it's something like, you've got a new job that pays you more money and you really love it, but it's a hard job. And it's a hard slog learning the new things you have to know to do the job, and the hard part of starting out in a new job. And so it's like, I think it's a good moment for just grounding into the wisdom of accepting the joys and sorrows of life, what it is to accept that every life and every moment has some of both. Some area of good fortune, some area where there's pain, and the way in which the joys of life make it possible to endure the pain and the loss, and the way in which having pain in our lives and loss in our lives makes it possible to have even bigger joys and even bigger laughs. Jupiter with Saturn has a lot to do with learning how to laugh about the painful dimensions of life. It has to do with developing a capacity to smile at our karmic condition, to smile at our fate when sometimes there are difficult consequences for choices that we've made, to be able to have a sense of humor through it all. And on the other hand, when sometimes we're too positive and just always smiling at life and not really a more well-rounded human being in touch with the full spectrum of what it is to be here, and perhaps also not empathic enough with the suffering of others. It's like Jupiter can be a sense of like generosity, being generous with our abundance to those in need. It has something to do with the haves and the have-nots, those that are more privileged, Jupiter, and those that are more oppressed. And so I think it's a moment to recognize where we have abundance that we can share with those in need. And so, yes, the Jupiter square Saturn is actually about a year-long alignment, just come in over the last couple of months. Another thing to think about with this Jupiter-Saturn square is that it's the first hard aspect of Jupiter and Saturn since their conjunction that happened in 2020 and early 2021. The great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn that only happens every 20 years. And so this is the first kind of crossroads moment of the overall Jupiter-Saturn cycle that started in 2020, which was a particularly potent, once in 1,000-year Jupiter-Saturn-Pluto triple conjunction and a quality of the whole end of an era, the post-pandemic era that we now live in. And so there was something really massive on a global geopolitical scale that, of course, happened in 2020 and 2021. And Jupiter and Saturn definitely have something to do with larger scale social structures, but they also have to do with larger scale kind of personal structures, moral structures, our kind of philosophical structures by which we live our lives. And so if you think back to what happened for you during the pandemic and how were you restructured, how did your moral structures evolve and transform? How did your philosophical approach to life evolve and transform? And now that we're at the square, the tendency would be for everything that kind of got started there, the growth that began there, to hit a kind of potentially maturational crisis, but also a maturational strengthening, where it's like over the past few years, as you've lived your life, the new post-pandemic version of yourself, how have you evolved and matured in ways where it's like that kind of moral structure, that philosophical structure that started to come in there has matured even more. And maybe it has strengthened in ways that you can really see strongly in your life at this point. Maybe those lessons that you learned during the pandemic have had time to really grow and strengthen, and you can see signs in your everyday life of how that's happened. And so that's something to be reflecting on over this next year, that Jupiter and Saturn are square to each other. And so, yes, it's a good time to be reflecting on your kind of global philosophy of life and the bigger picture that you're able to see the world through, and from that larger perspective, the way in which you structure your life in very mundane, everyday ways. That's what Saturn's about. Everyday structural realities that are informed by your philosophy of life, your cosmology, that perhaps was deeply impacted by the pandemic. I know my cosmology was deeply impacted. My sense of myself in the world as a player on a very large geopolitical playing field that can have a really big impact on my life, my sense of myself now in that bigger scale way, is really strong. And I would say it's kind of matured in ways. And I can see ways in which, I can see ways in which what's happening in the world right now, how it's kind of impacting me, how I'm seeing things now on a larger scale, geopolitical landscape. I'm able to see that from a new perspective. I don't feel like I need to go into any details on this. I just invite you to think about this and to maybe also consider how you've become too rigid in your big picture way of seeing things. Perhaps there's ways in which you became more conservative as a result of what happened in 2020 and 2021. And maybe that kind of conservative reaction to what happened has become too conservative, too rigid. And this is an opportunity to kind of look at that, be at a kind of crossroads with it, and to kind of breathe into it and see if anything wants to open up more, if anything wants to expand beyond the contraction that came in during the pandemic. So those are some thoughts on a big picture scale with the Jupiter-Saturn square. the end of the Jupiter-Uranus, entering into Jupiter square Saturn. And then there's another big outer planet alignment that is very rare, and this is Uranus trine Pluto. They're within 2 degrees right now. Last year, I think they got within 6 degrees or so, but this year within 2 degrees, and they're going to stay super tight the next few years. And it's Uranus trine Pluto, but you can also see here that Neptune is exactly halfway between them, sextile each. So you get this triangle pattern with 2 60-degree sides and one 120-degree side to the triangle pattern. And those are all flowing aspects. The fact that Neptune is exactly at the midpoint makes it more dynamic, more like a hard aspect configuration, potentially. I would say just not so much like a hard aspect, but it gives it more power than just your ordinary sextiles there between Neptune to Uranus and Neptune to Pluto. And so, yes, it's a very strong outer planet energy. And I would say it's a kind of opportunity to connect with these outer planet energies in a more flowing way. That's what the trine represents, a kind of flowing access to what Uranus and Pluto represent. Pluto, on the one hand, has to do with our greatest depths, our deepest reaches of our psyches. And Uranus has to do with freedom, breaking free and taking flight into the sky. Uranus is flying high in the sky, and Pluto's going down deep into the underworld. And so it's like they're in a harmonious relationship where there's a kind of support there. And there's a lot of ways in which they can come together in harmonious ways. Pluto also has to do with our life force energies, our passionate, creative life force energies, and Uranus is breakthroughs and liberation. And so there's a way in which their being in this harmonious trine for these few years is very supportive of creative aliveness, where you can be in touch with your deepest creative life force, and at the same time kind of inspired with a kind of electrical creativity where there's quantum leaps into new possibilities informed by that kind of passionate life force. It's very supportive of a kind of gradual but powerful evolutionary change kind of energy, where you feel a lot of life force energy from within you and from the world supporting you to evolve and change and break free of previous constraints. And so it's supportive on a kind of collective level of ongoing evolution and innovation and creative changes. But on an individual level, I think it's, I think it's a very supportive one for our own personal evolution and our creativity generally, and psychospiritual creativity, psychospiritual evolution. And so, yes, that is the trine between Uranus and Pluto, but with Neptune also in the mix in a harmonious way, Neptune having to do with spirituality and consciousness and the divine and the sacred and a sense of flowing states of consciousness and intuitive ways of being. It just takes that energy and brings soul to it, brings the potential for spiritual evolution, spiritual creativity, a kind of openness to new spiritual awareness and new spiritual ways of being. And so I think it's just very supportive for human evolution in general. But then it's like, you got to know, how is it lining up in your own personal chart? And how is it transiting? Or how are you getting transits from this very rare, it's only a few years that they're in this tight configuration. Basically the next 3 years, I think it is. It's till, actually it's towards the end of the decade, stays pretty close through the rest of the 2020s, next 4 or 5 years, I would say. But it's within 3 degrees the next 2-3 years. And so it's like, if one of these 3 planets, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, is in a strong relationship to your natal chart, more than likely all 3 of them are activating at the same time. And so it's like these outer planet energies, these transpersonal energies, opening you to your depths, to your heights, to your spiritual mysteries, all at the same time. It's super potent. And then when other planets are activating this in the sky collectively, then there's a real potential for things getting moving in terms of your own psychospiritual evolution. And so I did a video on this last year on the potential for kite formations. I'll link to it. But basically, when you've got a trine, there's a sweet spot in the sky that forms a grand trine. And basically, when another planet moves into that sweet spot, it really lights it up in a harmonious and dynamic way. And so all of the inner planets, the moon, Mercury, and Venus, and the sun will light it up approximately each year. And so over a 4 or 5 year period, the sun, Mercury, Venus light it up once each year, the moon every month, and then Mars is once or twice during that 5 year period is it in that sweet spot. And it just happens that recently we've had Venus going through that sweet spot with a Venus, Uranus, Pluto grand trine forming. Here today, you can see the Moon-Venus conjunction that's happening. It's actually on the grand trine, so it's a pretty special Venus gate, I feel, for that reason. It's like potential for a real kind of psychospiritual breakthrough where the heart opens is particularly potent with this Venus gate, this rose gate. But you can see Venus has just gone across it. It's kind of moving out of orb, but the moon is very tightly on there as I'm recording this. And in the not too distant future, the sun and Mercury are going to line up on it. And I just want to take a quick look at that. You can see here, so let's take a look at how the sun is going to light up this sweet spot pretty soon here. But before it does, it's actually activating that Jupiter-Saturn square that we were talking about. You can see right now that the sun is about 4 degrees opposite Saturn. Saturn's 3 degrees square Jupiter, with Jupiter 3 degrees past Saturn. And so the sun first hits Saturn 4 degrees, and then it's about 7 degrees square to Jupiter, but it gets more exact. And so when the sun is exactly opposite Saturn in a few days here, on the 7th, at that point, the sun is just 4 degrees square to Saturn, or excuse me, 4 degrees square to Jupiter. And so everything that I was saying about that Jupiter square Saturn is particularly potent these next couple of weeks. I would say up until, I don't know, it's still strongly activating things until the 16th of September. But as it gets towards that point, that's when it starts to light up this grand trine. And so let's kind of focus on, I don't know, the T-square, I would say, is still about September 13th. That's when the sun has moved 6 degrees past Saturn, but still just a couple of degrees from Jupiter. So it's like, it's really emphasizing that Jupiter square Saturn, those tensions of opposites. On the one hand, with Sun Saturn, a sense of perhaps feeling challenged by something, but with Jupiter there, with a lot of hope and optimism and potential for kind of working hard towards success. But that way in which I was talking about the need to get grounded, the Sun Saturn is all about that. So you might really be feeling this energy of kind of coming down to Earth after the big rocket launch of the Jupiter-Uranus earlier this year, and also kind of coming back from the summer energies, the fiery energies, and coming down to Earth after Leo into now being in Virgo season, which definitely want to talk about how we've moved into Virgo, and Virgo is harvest season. It's about getting organized. It's about bringing the medicine back into your life, the medicine of the harvest of the year, whether you're harvesting wisdom, harvesting the benefits of your hard work over the last months of the year. But Virgo is an earth sign, and it loves getting earthy. It loves getting its hands dirty as you harvest the crops. And Virgo is famous for, like getting organized. During the summer months, you're out in the world, you're out on vacation, you're out on adventures, or you're in kind of peak creative mode. But then as we move into fall, it's more about getting organized and coming back to focus more on practical matters. And it's often a time when, kids go back to school and you start to kind of buckle down as you move towards the fall months, and even now more aware that winter's not that far away, and it's like you're starting to prepare for the harder months ahead in terms of just a kind of seasonal metaphor. And so, definitely a way in which this is a time of getting grounded, coming down to earth, focusing more on work, focusing more on getting organized. I could really feel this energy strongly here recently, with just, really strong impulse to get organized and to clean and to, it's a kind of fall cleaning energy where you kind of smudge the house and you do your Palo Santo ritual, and you clear out the drawers and you make sure everything is in its place. You can your jams and you organize your medicine cabinet, and you structure your alchemical cabinets in ways that are pleasing to you. If you know what I'm saying. And so, yes, it's Virgo season, everybody. It's nice to kind of come down to earth and focus on practical matters. And so, the Saturn energy is kind of strong here. But then as we get towards the 13th, the sun comes into that grand trine with Uranus and Pluto and forms an opposition to Neptune. So it's not just a grand trine that forms in that sweet spot, but it's also the opposition to Neptune halfway between. And it makes it something more than just the harmony of a grand trine, the potent harmony of a grand trine. As trines are potent, but they're still flowing. They don't make things happen the way hard aspects do. But in that sweet spot right now, it's in an opposition to Neptune. That's where the sun is moving towards an opposition to Neptune, a kind of dynamic activation of the larger configuration. It's a moment where there's more of a dynamic potential for that kind of psycho-spiritual evolution that I was talking about. And so it's a kind of deep time for psycho-spiritual growth work, I would say, as we get closer to the 13th, when the sun kind of starts to move off the Jupiter-Saturn. It's more on Jupiter and with Neptune, which is another thing that's kind of happening here. Jupiter moves into a broader square with Neptune. I think it gets as close as like 7 degrees. That's something I'm not going to super focus on. There's an added complexity here where Saturn's getting close to Neptune. That's going to be the big outer planet energy of the next 2 years. It's definitely already coming in. I think it's a once in 35, 36 year conjunction, very rare outer planet conjunction, starting to come in and really coming in the early months of 2025 and then through all of 2026 into early 2027. And so, yes, things are complex here because Saturn's close enough to Neptune that you get first a square, first you get an activation of Saturn and then Neptune in pretty close order. So that's how you can have Jupiter square Saturn at the same time, Jupiter square Neptune starting to come in. Anyway, I was saying that the sun is starting to square Jupiter, moving off of the Saturn, but now by the 13th is 7 degrees from Neptune. And I think that's a good moment where maybe you'll be feeling like you're kind of coming out of that Saturnian crunch mode where you're kind of leaning into the challenges of your life and trying to get organized and do the work that's necessary to come into balance as you get closer to the equinox, which is September 22nd. The closer we get to the equinox, there's more of a kind of a strong feeling of I've got to come into balance. I've got to figure out what needs to happen to be more balanced. Where do you have to invest more energy and work at something to come into balance as we get closer to the equinox and Libra season? And so the sun starts to come into that sweet spot. And then from that point, the days after, if you look at as you get towards the 16th, let me look at my notes here. I want to focus on this date here, 17th and the 18th, at the full moon, which is an eclipse, everybody. It's a partial lunar eclipse. So at that point, the sun and the moon are activating the Uranus-Pluto trine with Neptune halfway between. That's a really potent full moon activation of the sweet spot we've been talking about. And at the same time, it's an eclipse. So eclipse season is coming in the closer we get to that full moon. And the following new moon is a solar eclipse. And so I'll just name that solar eclipse happening on October 2nd. We'll look at that. And that's a an annular solar eclipse, which brings the ring of fire phenomenon, where it's not totally covering the disk of the sun, but still an amazing thing to witness. This is an eclipse, a solar eclipse, that's not happening in super populated areas of the world. It's just going to be visible in the southernmost tip of South America, southern Chile, and southern Argentina. And so it's not going to have maybe the impact on the collective psyche the way the last solar eclipses did that went across Mexico and North America and crossed many very populated areas. But nevertheless, eclipse season is super powerful, and it initiates us into the deepest mysteries. But I'll come back to that solar eclipse. For now, I just want to take a quick look at this alignment that's happening on the 17th and 18th at the full moon, and the partial eclipse that will be visible in North and South America primarily. But a partial lunar eclipse, this one is just a little bite out of the full moon that will be visible. It should be visible. You should be able to see a little piece of the moon that clearly is darker. It's different than a penumbral lunar eclipse, which is when the moon's shadow doesn't quite fully go across the Earth. Am I saying that right? Or it's the Earth's shadow doesn't quite go across the moon. It's just the outer edge of the shadow in a penumbral eclipse, which means you can't really see it at all, in my experience. Can't notice that it's happening visually. But a partial lunar eclipse you can notice, and I am hoping to get out to see it that night that it's exact on the 17th here in Colombia. What did I write down? It's 9 to 10 p.m. Colombia time, which is Central Daylight Time in the United States, is the exact. It's the exact full moon on the 17th. But you have to do the calculation to see what that time is in your local area. And when it's at that peak, for that 30 minutes on either side, if you've got clear skies, you should be able to see that part of the moon grow dark. And I'm imagining it'll look particularly cool with binoculars. And so I'm hoping to check it out. And yeah, eclipse season always invites us into the hidden depths of our being. You know, it's like what ordinarily are bright lights at the full moon and the new moon, either the brightness of the sun, which obscures the moon, or the brightness of the moon that is shining opposite the sun. When those are usually bright, they are made dimmer. So there's something about going into the hidden, darker reaches of our psyche, and where darker realms are illuminated and illuminated realms are made dark. It's a very mysterious time for a month, twice each year. Eclipse season happens and we go through a kind of journey into the depths of our psyche. And so, yeah, I've noticed that it definitely stirs things up. And so, yes, be aware as we get closer to the middle of September, we're moving into eclipse season. And when we have the full moon and this partial lunar eclipse, it's super potent because the sun and the moon are on that Uranus, Pluto, Neptune exact configuration that's happening within 2 or 3 degrees now. And so, yeah, kind of feel as we get to the middle of the month, there's a lot of potential for, supporting psychospiritual growth work. And so I'm kind of thinking about that time as maybe an opportunity to kind of set a little time aside for spiritual self-exploration, for inner work. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like for me, but I'm going to try to make some space there to catch this special wave, this outer planet wave, and travel into the outer planet dimensions of my psyche. You know what I'm saying? So, yes, you can see here that also Mercury is coming onto it. It hits Mercury, it hits Saturn and Jupiter, but then there's a point where they're both. The Sun is exactly opposite Neptune on the 20th. Mercury's moved within 8-9 degrees here here. Mercury's just 5 degrees opposite Neptune, starting to form the trine with Uranus, 4 degrees. The trine with Pluto, 6 degrees. So you get both the Sun and Mercury activating that sweet spot. Potential for kind of personal openings with the Sun, and the potential for openings of the mind to those transpersonal dimensions. Really stimulating time, I feel, as we get to the middle and later parts of September. Of course, here on the 22nd is the equinox, and the equinox is, it's coinciding with the Sun activating that sweet spot. So it should be a particularly potent equinox moment, a moment of coming into balance, while at the same time a sense of opening in very powerful transpersonal ways, potentially. And so, yes, Mercury being in that sweet spot is the tightest from the 23rd to the 25th of September. I've got the 24th here on the screen. You can see Mercury's exactly opposite Neptune, very tightly trine to Uranus and Pluto as well. And I just want to name that that's the peak of the Mercury-Neptune cycle of time, the conjunction back in the spring, now the opposition coming in the fall, and kind of climax moment in what the Mercury-Neptune cycle of time is all about. And it has so much to do with a kind of spiritual opening of the mind and the potential for kind of communicating with one's higher self and receiving spiritual messages of guidance from transcendent locations and dimensions. And it has so much to do with studying astrology, exploring astrology and tarot and other divinatory tools that are all about kind of opening a psychic channel to have a dialogue with higher energies, your higher self, spirit guides, spirit allies, ancestors. And so there's a kind of peak in your journey each year in terms of opening the mind to kind of the psychic dimensions and the potential for psychic downloads and really strong moments where you feel intuitively guided. Yeah, so that's really coming in here when Mercury's going through that sweet spot along with the Sun. And so, yes, and basically you get the Mercury-Sun exterior conjunction happening here on September 30th. And that's always a really strong Mercury moment as well, often where there's a kind of really strong mental energy, a strong focus on communication, and where it's like the mind is on fire. And you can see this particular Mercury Cazimi is square to Mars. So it's a Sun-Mercury square Mars that's coming in late in the month. You can see the new moon that happens on October 2nd, that Libra new moon, which is the solar eclipse alignment. It's an exact Sun, Moon, Mercury triple conjunction, and they're all square to Mars. So that's a pretty potent solar eclipse energy, I would say. it's a pretty potent Libra new moon there. And so the equinox begins on September 22nd, and the Libra energy comes in strong there. But when you get to the Libra new moon, that's when Libra energy is really dominating. And so that's really the moment that we're all aiming for in terms of coming into balance for our year, coming back into balance and starting to move towards the end of the year, setting things up well for the last few months of the year. And this is the point where the solar eclipse happens to be powerfully activated. And so it's going to be an interesting moment there where you've had the Sun and Mercury go through that sweet spot, and the strong activation of Neptune, the strong potential for psychospiritual growth and evolution. And then at the same time, you're in the middle of eclipse season, which is so deep and often takes us into really deep places within ourselves, but also into really deep territory in terms of our interpersonal life, our family life. And so it's a charged time. I think it's a good time to think about getting an astrology reading. And so I hope you'll check out the information that's in the box below about my current promotion. I'd love to do a reading for you during this time. I think it would be a great time to get some support. So yes, what else do I want to say here as we move forward off of this new moon solar eclipse? We move out of eclipse season, but towards the next Venus gate alignment on October 5th. Check out the most recent video on our current Venus gate. This will be the next one a month from now. This one in Scorpio. It'll be higher in the sky. And again, I really encourage you to be kind of checking in with these Moon-Venus conjunctions each month and recommitting to self-love and self-kindness. And this Moon-Venus conjunction is also forming a really nice grand trine with Mars and Saturn. So there's a Mars, Saturn, Venus grand trine that starts to come in it starts to come in strong early October. And then by the time we get to the Venus gate, October 5th, it's pretty exact. 2 degrees from Mars, 1 degree from Saturn, the moon right on it. And this is a special one for our love relationships, also for getting out and having fun while at the same time staying grounded. Venus trine Mars is really nice for getting out and being active with friends and loved ones. It's great for going dancing with your beloved, and it's great to hear some live music. But then to kind of keep it balanced with Saturn keeping it grounded, but also kind of disciplined. And it's a really great energy for getting out and having fun in a very mature and grounded way, where you're still keeping it real and keeping it responsible, doing your homework, if you know what I'm saying, but also remembering to get out and dance. And so it's a really great one for kind of developing your most committed love relationships. That's Venus trine Saturn. It really brings in a sense of commitment and a kind of maturity with which you are in your closest relationships. It's a really loyal one, so it's a good time to be reconnecting with the people that you have the most committed relationships with. And it's a time for kind of investing more time in those relationships. And at the same time with Mars there, it gives some fire to it. It gives some energy. And so think about the relationships that you're most loyal to, most committed to, and bring some energy to it. Make a commitment to go out on a date, to go dancing and have some fun with those people that you have the most serious commitments with. And on the next Venus gate on October 5th, it's a good time to kind of maybe plan on that, to go out and see the Moon-Venus conjunction with one of your friends or lovers, and to have some fun afterwards, to go out dancing afterwards, perhaps. Maybe have a party on the next Venus gate. All go out to see it together and put on some music and all dance together, something like that. That's October 5th. And then what else? What else do I want to focus on? There's a comet that could be visible to the naked eye. Some astronomers are saying it could be one of the great comets, where it's just like super easy to see. And this one starts to be visible it's actually visible in the southern hemisphere starting in later September, but then it is more visible in the northern hemisphere in early October, with the peak likelihood of seeing it. This is Comet C23A3, and its closest approach to the Earth is around October 12th. And just look it up online and try to figure out where it's most visible. You can figure it out with a phone app. It can tell you where to look and when, generally, because it's actually going to be visible kind of higher in the sky, which means there'll be more time to see it without the sun interfering. And so I'm looking forward to trying to see a comet with my naked eye. The last time that happened for me was Comet Neowise in 2020. They're kind of comparing it to that one as potentially being as bright, but maybe even brighter, with a nice long tail, I think they're saying. And so I'm looking for that. And there's other things happening, but I think I'm going to leave it there. I think I've covered enough. Hopefully you can get a feeling that it's a pretty potent time, a good time to do some deep dives into your own psyche. It's a good time to get some support for your psycho-spiritual development. And again, I would love to be of support to you at this time, so check out the offer in the box down below. Really appreciate the likes and subscribes and the shares. Really helps get the message out. So I'm sending blessings and love and light and wishing you all very well. Till next time.